Hi, it's Greg McCone from Fraser Valley Climate Action, and welcome to Section 4, Part 4 of our Climate Change for Faith communities. If you'd like more resources, scan this code with your phone and check out our website. Love to have you join us as a member, and love to have you taking action alongside us. That'd be great. So, we're going to talk about practical action for faith communities. And as I was putting this together, I realized there's a few pieces that are missing that I need to just fill in the blanks. So here in British Columbia, 97% of our electricity is renewable. Most of it is from hydropower. There's some wind turbines, there's some solar, there's some other things as well. Arguably, a very high percentage of it is renewable. And so that basically means that in other jurisdictions, the first thing they're having to do is convert their electricity generation to something renewable so they're not producing greenhouse gases. BC is basically done. Sure, we can always do better, but in terms of having to solve big problems like electricity, that part's done. We're started on transportation. BC has some of the highest adoption of electric vehicles in North America. We're leading North America. Quebec is behind us. California is behind us, and that's because we've had the government and we've had industry working together to really get infrastructure in place and to make these programs happen. We've had incentives from the federal and provincial governments. Everybody's been working, hand in hand to make this happen. So we've started there. Heating our buildings in a way that doesn't pollute. We've started there too, with incentives, the Canada Greener Homes Grant, and other things. So people will put in electric heat pumps instead of burning fossil fuels to heat their home or heat their water. And then there's industrial applications as well. Interesting. So the the short notes are anything electrical is good. Basically, compared to fossil fuels, it emits basically no pollution at all. Almost none at generation, like 3%. And then at source, at use, like there's no emissions coming out of your light bulbs. There's no greenhouse gases coming out of the back of an EV. Like there's no emission at use. So, I mean, there's all kinds of health benefits there too, but the main point is we're not causing climate change by using electrical power. So, if you have an option between electrical and fossil, electrical's the right choice there. So, faith communities, corporately, we can make room for voices that are singing slightly different notes together in harmony with us. We don't need everybody to believe exactly the same thing. We don't need everybody to do exactly the same thing. So just consider how we can harmonize together with other voices. Um, and there's no place for purity tests in climate action. So if somebody drives a big, huge diesel truck to your climate rally, great, welcome them there. Had to get there somehow. So we're not going to run around judging people like, oh, you're not driving an EV, or oh, your house is heated with fossil fuels. It's like we all got to live somewhere. This is where we start, and then we move forward together. So, what are the ways that your faith group could make room for voices that are singing different notes together? Would you consider hosting a climate conference? How about an annual climate fair for the city? How about a letter writing campaign? Could be anything, right? But I think we need some spaces, some positive spaces where we start to draw people together. Um, is this congregation what is known as a peace church? That's a tradition of Christian churches, certainly. Um, so if you look back in your history, when we had nuclear proliferation during the Cold War and people were protesting, no nukes, we had the idea of non-proliferation treaties. At least let's not allow more nukes and more countries to get nuclear power and nuclear weapons. That was the point, right? Power is probably okay. And so, in the same spirit as that non proliferation treaty, there's an opportunity for organizations like yours to sign the fossil fuel non proliferation treaty. The idea is let's just agree not to add to the problem and make it worse. So, let's not put in new infrastructure, whether that's new mines for coal or whether that's new pipelines to transport fossil fuels so they can be burned, or new LNG export facilities, or a new gas burner at the church for heating the space, or buying a new gas school bus to move the youth group around. Like, let's not add to the problem. So there's letter, specifically a place for faith groups to sign. And 2,807 organizations and institutions have signed. If you haven't yet, get in there, add your name to it. It just shows that more and more people are supporting this, which helps others. Not everybody wants to go first. These organizations have not signed on first, or signed on yet. So government organizations can sign on as well. We haven't had Canada or British Columbia or the city of Abbotsford sign on. We have had 18 municipalities and cities in BC sign on, and there's more coming. But we need to help the leaders understand, like, at least let's not make it worse, guys. And it's a little bit sad to recognize that we haven't even made it that far yet. So when we think of signing up for things, that's kind of using our voice, right? Hey, this is what we believe. That's an example of speaking for ourselves. There's also, for faith communities, this idea of speaking in support of others, whether it's compassionately speaking out to protect the vulnerable, or whether it's challenging government to do better on behalf of everybody. There's an opportunity there. And we in different traditions, it comes out in different ways. In the Christian faith, it would look like love your neighbor. So are we speaking out to protect our neighbor, to um, you know protect them, to love them, to care for them? Let me ask a question. Is this a picture of a person loving their neighbor? We all breathe the same air, right? Maybe that one's a little too close to home. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just a wake-up call. If going to church means you have to put pollutants into the air that your neighbor's going to breathe, maybe you need to think about how you get to church. If going to work, or getting your groceries, or going to the doctor is causing this kind of pollution that not only is going to cause greenhouse gases, but health concerns for those with local air pollution, maybe you need to do better. There are other ways for people to get around. And it doesn't mean you don't have to drive a car. It just means don't drive a polluting car. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. 41% of British Columbia's greenhouse gas emissions are from transportation. It's not all light duty passenger vehicles. A lot of it is big semis, but hey, this is part of the problem, right? So corporately, together, how do people come to the meetings for your faith group? Do you make it easy for them to use clean transportation? Is it easy for them to walk? Is there a receptacle for umbrellas? Is it easy for them to bike? Is there a safe, secure, covered bike rack there? Is there charging for e-bikes? Um, are you near a bus stop? Have you asked for a bus stop? Have you asked for a bus shelter or a bench? Are you providing bus schedules to people so they can figure out when their bus is coming if they're at your meetings? Is there carpooling? Quite often there's people who aren't able to drive anymore and somebody else is able to bring them along. That's carpooling. Maybe you got people coming from clear across town. Maybe they could be carpooling together. Interesting idea, right? So when we look at some of these properties that belong to faith communities, we might notice that a significant amount of the property is allocated for the parking of single occupancy vehicles. Maybe most of the property, maybe more than half of the property. So just consider what message that sends, right? This much of the space is dedicated to this one mode of transportation that is generally polluting and not very environmentally friendly, right? So maybe we could do better. Maybe we could see some leadership there. What about the mortgage on the property? If there's millions or however much money is in the mortgage, what percentage of that mortgage is just going to pay for parking spots, right? When you think about allocating money to ministry, what percentage of the money is going to the mortgage and consequently to the bank just to have parking spots everywhere, right? So there's some opportunities to examine what we're doing and to recognize that we've been very imbalanced for a long period of time, and we can fix that. That's a good thing about when it's our responsibility. We can just fix it. If it's our fault, we can just fix it. Consider EV parking as an incentive. You could have cleaner air by the building by designated the closed spots as EVs. You could have less noise by the building when the doors open. You don't have a big diesel truck there warming up. Just have an EV that quietly purrs away. Um, and it lets your group showcase clean technology for other members who get to walk by and go like, oh, that's a smart looking car. Um, there you go. What about electric vehicle charging infrastructure? You got those parking spots anyways. Are they full all throughout the week, or are they just being used one day a week? What if you put in charging infrastructure? You don't need to give it away. You could, but maybe that creates a convenient option for your neighbors. Maybe your neighbors need a little top up, or their home electrical panel isn't good enough, and you're solving a problem for them. Um, Heck, maybe you turn a profit on it, and it becomes a source of income for your community. Um, yeah, not to appeal to greed or anything like that, but it could support adoption in the neighborhood. A lot of people, when they buy an EV, they don't instantly have an EV charger installed. There's a period of time while they're talking to the electrician and getting all the things sorted out for a couple weeks where they got to charge someplace. So wouldn't that be cool if it generated revenue? That would be pretty cool. So think about how many people attend your weekly meeting, and we'll think of a smaller group. We'll think of maybe 50 people attending. Um, or 50 households maybe. How far would those households drive in a year? If they drove what is for many people an average of 20,000 kilometers a year, commuting to Surrey and back for work or something, that's 1,000,000 kilometers a year. And that is equivalent to about 100,000 liters of gasoline or 230,000 kilograms of CO2, 230 tons of CO2. That's enough CO2 to fill 39 hot air balloons. And CO2, according to NASA, is going to last in the atmosphere for between 300 to 1,000 years. Remember, we're just talking about 1 year's pollution. Can you trace your family back that many generations? 12 to 40 generations? That's a long time. I can do 3, maybe 4. That's it, right? That our pollution is going to outlive us in tremendous measure. Now, this is not to scale, but it gets worse. About 3/4 of the gas you buy for your gas car is just wasted on heat and friction. And only 25% of that energy actually moves your car because gas cars are embarrassingly inefficient. So 75 cents of every dollar you spend on gas goes down the drain for nothing. It's just to make your engine hot, make your exhaust smell bad. What if over the next 5 years, everybody in your faith community switched to a battery electric vehicle? What if your whole community just stopped polluting? Now, air travel is the worst. It's not just polluting, it's polluting high in the atmosphere where the greenhouse gases have the most impact. Some travel is unavoidable, family emergencies, etc. But what about destination weddings? Are we encouraging that sort of thing? Do we encourage a culture of regular long distance travel, keeping up with the Joneses? Oh, where are you flying to this year? Or, are we content that we live in a beautiful place and maybe that happens here? So we talked about transportation and pollution. Let's talk about heating and buildings. So individually in our homes, we might be heating here. 11% of BC's greenhouse gas emissions are from home heating the water, heating the air. It's mostly from burning methane. That's a fossil fuel that's marketed to us as natural gas. Just start saying methane. That's what it is. Stop repeating the marketing. It's not natural gas, it's methane. It's not clean, it's not natural, it's not part of the solution. If you got one of these things attached to your house or your apartment, you're contributing to the pollution that causes climate change. We need to come to terms with that. If we're responsible, we can fix it. So it's good to be responsible. You could encourage your group members to make their next hot water tank electric, non-polluting. Whether it's a heat pump or not is up to them. But these appliances, they can last for 20 years. So you're locking in future pollution. Maybe you have to pay a couple $100 more or not. Maybe you have to pay an electrician to come in and upgrade a wire. You just do that once, and for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, however long a hot water tank lasts at your house, you're not creating greenhouse gas emissions. you're not polluting. All right, so that was talking about the home front. Let's talk about corporately. So, has your faith community done energy upgrades um, to make sure that you're using energy efficiently throughout your facility? Um, Energy efficient upgrades in church buildings, not wasting energy might mean saving money, but that's not the main point. It's great if it happens. But at this point, a lot of people get confused and they're like, well, doing the right thing should cost less. That's not necessarily true. The point is to do the right thing, period. If you find a way for it to cost less, great. That's savings you can reinvest in more environmental responsibility later. So we want to see people investing in electric space heating, electric water heating for their buildings, insulation. Uh, get an energy audit done. Figure out where all the heat is pouring out of your building. I guarantee you, there's a place, and solve that first. Then you're going to bring your overall heating costs down, anyways. Um, so here is a satellite picture of Langley Mennonite Fellowship, and they recently agreed to a plan to spend $150,000 to make the whole building heated with an air source heat pump. And so you can see there's a preschool or daycare there as well. And so in the summertime, they're going to have cooling, and in the wintertime, they're going to have heating. And it's all just going to come from the ambient air temperature around them. A heat pump can totally take care of that. And that's going to mean that they can use clean electricity to heat instead of polluting fossil fuels. So talk about putting their money where the mouth is. Good for them. So, what about outside of the walls? So, not necessarily the houses of your members, not necessarily the corporate meeting space. What about people who are just in your community? We know that climate change affects the poor more than the wealthy. Are we advocating for the government to care for everyone, or are we caring for them? Is our city offering incentives for heat pumps, for electrifying hot water heaters? No, generally not. Are the provincial programs just incentives for those who already have additional money to spend? Um, yeah, mainly. And that's a challenge, right? Because poor folk don't have 15,000 or 20,000 sitting in the bank to, you know, put up the money for a new heat pump, waiting for the rebate check to come in later. Might take a couple months, right? Folks who are comfortable, well off, they're happy to take that rebate check when it comes along, but they basically already have the money to do the job. So it could be that incentives are a good thing; they start moving us in the right direction, but they're not the whole picture. It's not enough. We have to go beyond incentives. We got to think about how do we make sure that people get what they need. Um, so think about incentives and rebates this way. You already pay the money out in the taxes, and that money's sitting in the hands of the government. The government is willing to give it back to your community. Um, so why not bring that money back into your community via the federal and provincial rebates, and use municipal rebates to sweeten the pot to incentivize people? So if you look at the city of Surrey, the township of Langley, the city of Chilliwack, you'll see they have incentives and rebates on their pages. They're throwing a little bit of money in there, just enough to kind of get you going. Maybe it's a rebate on a toilet that uses less water, or a hot water tank that doesn't burn fossil fuels, that sort of thing. You'll notice Mission and Abbotsford are not included here. They don't have anything, at least nothing on their website that I could find. Um, so get with the program, guys. At least do the bare minimum and put some incentives in place, because it brings money into your community. But then I think we need to do more. Um, so, yeah. What about people in apartments who can't just decide to change their furnace? It's not their furnace. With increasing heat, some apartments here in our town are pretty hot in the summer. And what if residents can't afford to buy their own portable air conditioning unit, or they're not allowed to put it in? They're not allowed to put something in the window, or put a hole in the wall, or whatever is necessary, right? Um, so that's making, again, poor folks and folks without control, it's making them responsible for solving the problem. What if the government just bought the heat pumps, right? Just every apartment gets a heat pump. It's a one-time expense. And suddenly, all of these apartments are not sweltering hot, causing people to die. It's a real thing, guys, in the summertime. And they're staying warm enough in the wintertime. And our dependence on fossil fuels goes down, our pollution goes down, right? There's definitely people advocating for this. Maybe faith communities would like to join in this advocacy. What about making landlords provide safe housing? Um, it is not safe when an apartment block gets up to 40 degrees Celsius. Uh, People start dying, and it's been happening in British Columbia. We had lots of people die in 2021. Um, so let's move past the heating, cooling, and transportation, and let's talk about stewardship. Let's talk about collective action of divestiture. When we put money in the bank or in an investment, that money gets lent out to help somebody else do business. That's how banking works. So if our investments are funding the activities that cause climate change, then our investment will make it easier for climate change to hurt people. In that case, we become a part of the system that hurts people. Now, if we divest our investments so they're not funding the expansion of oil and gas, then our investments are not part of the problem. See, sometimes a faith community has money invested. It could be a pension fund for the pastors. It could be a building fund for a planned addition to a building, or even just operating accounts. We just keep $30,000 here in case, some surprise expense comes up. If that is being invested in a place that is going to lend that money out to oil and gas, then that money is making it easy for oil and gas to pollute. Investing in fossil fuels contradicts the values and the beliefs of many people of faith. Fossil fuel companies are responsible for significant environmental and social harm and have displaced entire communities. They've also caused more extreme weather alongside other negative impacts and have often worked behind the scenes to stop or delay climate legislation. As these companies continue to underinvest in renewables and overheat the planet, all while exploring for new oil and gas against the dire warnings of scientists and the United Nations, should we be making it easier or harder for them to get financing? Yeah. Some people doing some good work. There's a whole bunch of UK churches that have moved millions of pounds, that's their currency, out of oil, gas, and coal, the burning of which causes global heating. UK churches are taking a stand and calling for the transition to a cleaner, brighter future. Divestment, and this is Operation Noah, is now the way forward. Instead of engaging with fossil fuel companies as investors, which has not produced the change that the world needs at the pace required, um, the Church of England national investing bodies recognized this when they divested in June 2023. Many of UK's national or regional church bodies have now divested, including the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Scotland, the Methodist Church in Britain, the Church in Wales, the Church in Scotland, the Quakers in Britain, the Church of Ireland, and the Baptist Union. They're taking their money out of institutions that invest in oil and gas. And so half of all Catholic dioceses in England and Wales have also now divested, and all but two churches of England dioceses have. This reflects a growing recognition that investing in fossil fuels is no more an ethical investment than investing in tobacco, firearms, or gambling. So collective action. You can invite your members to switch banks, shifting their investments away from institutions that fund climate change. And there's a link here, bank.green. You can go look up your bank and see how it does. In this area, there's two recommendations that stand out above other banks, and that's Van City and that's Coast Capital. And so we want to encourage you to join us in this campaign for a sustainable future. So as Christians, we want to use our money and our voice to make it clear that entire segments of society, such as the church, are no longer willing to fund the fossil fuel industry as we instead work to align our investments with our values. So if your money's in Van City, here's what Bank.Green says about them. It's one of the favorites. The bank does not fund or invest in fossil fuel companies. They support clean energy projects. There's a number of green products, financing for zero and low emission vehicles, newer used pedal bikes, e-bikes, scooters, EV charging stations, and conversion kits. Coast Capital Savings Federal Credit Union does not engage in lending to fossil fuel or renewable energy sectors. That part's a little confusing for me. The bank is committed to sustainability. It's a B Corp certification, which means they care equally about planet, people, and profit. They have a very clean greenhouse gas emissions report and science-based emission reduction targets. What if you bank at BMO, Bank of Montreal? Well, number 4 in Canada for fossil fuel financing. So this is if your banks, sorry, if your faith community's checking account is at BMO and you got money sitting in the account, they're lending it out for fossil fuel investment. That's how banking works. So in the 8 years since the Paris Agreement, the banks in this category have funneled 6.9 trillion into coal, oil, and gas, rapidly accelerating the climate crisis. Okay, some of these are sort of similar. CIBC is number 3 in the world for tar sand financing, one of the 60 biggest funders of fossil fuels in the world. So if you bank at CIBC, that's a problem, right? Same category as the previous one. RBC is number 1 in Canada for fossil fuel financing. Oh gosh, guys, if you're banking with RBC, move your money and tell them why. Definitely one of the biggest funders in the world. Um, this bank has funneled 256 billion USD into coal, oil, and gas since the Paris Agreement in 8 years, basically. Huge amount of money going into oil and gas. This is expansion, right? Scotiabank is the number 2 financier of fossil fuels in Canada. They're failing on responsibility. Um, the 10th biggest funder of fossil fuels. Okay. TD, number 1 in the world for tar sands financing. And they're in that same category we talked about earlier. So, like, your bank is funding oil pipelines. That's what they do. Since the Paris Agreement was signed, banks have pumped over 4.4 trillion pounds. I should have converted that into the fossil fuel industry. Between 2015 and 2021, banks pumped over 4.4 trillion into the fossil fuel industry. I think I just said that. Big oil companies have projects that are identified, in place, and ready to be financed that will exceed the remaining global carbon budget 7 times over if realized. So basically, if they can just get the financing, then they'll pollute more. And if your faith organization is keeping your money in those banks, that's where the financing comes from. So divestment is something practical that you can do. Switch to a green bank. Move your money out of fossil fuel support for good. Use your customer power to support a bank which is not actively contributing to climate breakdown. By choosing a bank that's green or greener, you move your lifetime deposits out of fossil fuel support and don't put them back in. Plus, you can support the social and environmental projects that green banks invest in instead. So let's kind of wrap it up with a bow. So climate change and faith community values align: compassion, truth mattering, thankfulness for the gift of creation. We can act as individuals, we can act corporately, and we can act beyond our walls to benefit our community. We can use our voice, we can heat our buildings with non-polluting energy, we can switch to non-polluting transportation, we can make sure that our finances don't enable climate change. See, faith communities have a unique role to play in fighting climate change, but don't just leave it there. Take the next step. Join us, sign up, and let's get a plan underway for your community to start taking practical and ongoing actions to fight climate change, because we can. So, I talked at the beginning about how working on climate change for me is an act of worship. It would be a tragedy if we all leave here nodding and saying, yeah, good thought. And that's the end. The trick is to transform it into action. So we're hoping that you'll join us on this journey. Again, the QR codes are here. If you want to scan them on your phone, come to our website, get to know us. Or, if your organization has reached out to us for these materials, we'll happily coach you along. So there's a number of resources, and we showed you in the other sections that we used for this presentation that are free of royalties to use. And we just want to show those names and those credits here just out of respect. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. All the best.